In this episode, we're going to show you how to install the operating system so that you can use your fresh PC build.
You're watching IT Pro TV.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for tuning in to more of the hands-on PC build. That's right. In this episode, we're going to show you how to install an operating system on your PC. So it's more than just a glorified paperweight. So what do you say we go ahead and get started here? And I'm on my laptop as we don't have an operating system. We need to install that operating system. And we didn't put an optical drive in our PC because that really is almost like a legacy type technology. But what we do need to do, we still need to get that operating system on, and the way we're going to do that is with a USB thumb drive. So I thought it would be nice to show you how you can make your USB thumb drive bootable so that you can plug it into the port on the front or back of your PC, and when you boot, you can point your firmware to that USB drive, and we can get that operating system installed. Now, I'm up on Microsoft's website, and when you buy your operating system, you can acquire it through Microsoft, and when you do that, a lot of times what you'll see that you get this downloadable ISO file. I've already downloaded it, and I'll show you that file here in a second, but then you need to take that file and you need to format one of these thumb drives in a way that it will apply those files to that thumb drive, and then again you can boot into it and start the installation process. So let me show you a little tool and I'll put the website here in the link, or the link I should say in the show notes, so that you all can have the access to this out here. But this is a little utility that's been around for a while from Microsoft, and it's free. And you can see this is the URL that we're using. Again, I will put it in the show notes. And it is the USB DVD download tool. And it is, again, it's a free download. You just choose what your language is going to be, and then you choose download, and you'll get a small file that you can then install. Now, I've already downloaded the file, and I've actually installed this software because it's a little wizard-driven installation, so it's very easy. And I know you all are a sharp crowd out there, so you'd have no problem with this. But here is the installer. I have it on my desktop here, and it's just simple. Double-click through it, and it starts the wizard, and you just next, and you finish the installation. And I'm going to go ahead and just cancel the installation for now. Don't be discouraged by the fact that it says Windows 7. I know you're probably going to say, well, what does this have to do with Windows 10? It's been around for a long time, but as you're going to see, we can use it for all of the Windows operating systems, including the latest at the time of this recording. We're here in July of 2020. We're going to be using the Windows 10 2004 version, which is the most current version as of the recording of this series. I'm going to go ahead and just cancel out of this, just finish it up, and when you are done, what you will have is you'll have this little executable or shortcut on your desktop that you can run, and notice that it does take administrative privileges, so you will have to be an administrator on your computer in order to use it. The next thing, you'll have to have your ISO file, and I already have my Windows 10 ISO file, disk image file, and this utility is going to write that to that USB drive in a way that we can boot to it. Now, I've gone ahead and I've plugged in a USB thumb drive to my computer, and if we open up File Explorer, we can see that down here at the bottom. If I open up File Explorer, you'll see that I do have a new volume here. This is over here on the left-hand side, you can see New Volume E. That is the thumb drive. Now, I will tell you, be careful with this, because when you go to format this with a USB DVD download tool, if you will, it is going to erase everything off of that drive. So don't use a thumb drive that you potentially have something on it. Let me go ahead and just not now, see what's coming up there. And then from there, what you're going to want to do is just go ahead and you're going to want to launch this utility just by double clicking on it from the desktop, and go ahead and say yes to the user account control, and it's going to bring up this small interface, and it's really just point and click from here. What you're going to do is it says choose your ISO file. Our ISO file is on our desktop, and if I just right click on this ISO file, choose properties, you can see that this is a disk image file. It's much the same thing as your installation file if you had a DVD of Windows 10. If you have a DVD of Windows 10 on your computer, just slide the DVD in the optical drive, and then when we boot it, I'll show you how you could point it to that installation disk to ensure that you can install your operating system. Now, once this part is done, they're going to ask you just browse for the source file, and we're going to browse. It's right on the desktop here. So what I'm looking for is my 2004, disk image, if you will. And what I'm going to do, and let me go ahead and point that to the desktop. Here is our disk image, and we'll choose Open. Once that's done, we just choose Next, and it's going to ask you, please select the media type. We could burn this to a DVD. Again, remember, we do not have an optical drive in our machine here, which is really common for a lot of computers today. So we're going to use a copy to USB, and it's asking us to point it to either one. In this case, I'm going to choose USB device, and it's going to find the USB device that I showed you. And that's that E:new volume. And again, just plugged it in, Windows recognized it, and it's going to ask us to begin copying. And then it's going to let you know that you're going to have to erase all the contents. So don't worry about formatting. You don't have to pre-format the thumb drive or anything. You can just choose erase this drive, and it's going to ask you to confirm this. That means all of the content that's on this device is going to be lost, because it's saying not enough free space, because I've already got a partition. It's already formatted prior to using this utility. I'm going to say OK with that. I will confirm it. And it'll start to format the USB device, and then what you're going to see is it's going to verify that your ISO file is free of corruption, that it's maintained its integrity, and then it's going to start the process of copying the files over to the USB. Now, we're going to go ahead, and I actually have this process done, because this could take a little while in order to get done. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to close down my Mac in my operating system here on this side, and because we're done with that for now. And I've already got the operating system via this utility that's been finished ahead of time, so that we can go ahead and just move along with our install. Now, in order to do this, what I'm going to do is I'm going to plug this in. For me, I'm going to plug it into the front panel USB. It might be on the front of your computer. You can plug it on the back. That's perfectly fine as well. What I would suggest is not using the older USB ports, because you want a faster transfer. So use your USB 3.1, and we're going to go ahead and we're going to boot the computer up. And you can see our splash screen will come up. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to hit F12 on my keyboard to hit the one-time boot menu. Pay attention to the manufacturer of your BIOS or firmware, UEFI BIOS, because it might be a different keyboard shortcut. Sometimes it's F10. Sometimes it might be delete, might be escape. For me, it was F12, and now I see the one-time boot menu. And it's asking me, where do I want to point the firmware to look for that bootloader to start loading the operating system. In this case, I'm going to choose the Patriot memory, and that is going to be this what this USB drive is. If you have it in an optical drive, then just choose the optical drive, and it'll go right to the DVD player, if you will, and it'll pull it off of the DVD player. And then from here, it's just a matter of hitting enter. And what it's going to do is it'll take a second. It's not going to load as fast as it would if the operating system was already on it, because understand that you're actually pulling it off of the side of, or you're pulling it off of the USB device, and you're loading the installer, it's a small footprint version of Windows, into memory so that you can start to access the hardware and install the operating system on your drive, in this case our solid state drive that you've seen us install earlier in the series. Then at this point, it's just a matter of picking your language. The language is typically already chosen for you based on your locale. I'm here in the United States, so mine is English, but it doesn't matter if you happen to be in Germany, if you happen to be in Japan, if you happen to be in Europe, in the UK. Just pick the the language. If you do have a selection that you can make that is right for you. Same thing with the time and currency. I'm just going to keep it United States, and the same thing goes with the keyboard layout. And we're going to choose next. Now, we've got a couple of options here, and what we want to do is we want to choose the installed now. Now, once you do this, what you can do, if you have existing partitions, let's say you've used a hard drive that maybe isn't new, you might have existing partitions on this. We can also format this as a part of the installation process. What you see here is what's known as your end user license agreement, the EULA. You're going to have to accept the terms, and then you can choose next. Now, if you're doing an in-place upgrade, you would actually launch up your Windows operating system by pushing power on the computer, and then you would put boot to this installer, and you could do an upgrade. We don't have an operating system installed, so we're going to use the custom install Windows only. And we're going to choose this option. Now notice this has a couple of partitions on it ahead of time. What I'm going to do is go ahead and I'm going to delete all of these partitions. And it might give you a hard time on a couple of them. You're going to notice that you can't install Windows. It'll say can't install Windows on some of these. And that's because some of these partitions are actually created as part of the installation process. So I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to delete all of these partitions. And what we should see is that at the end we have an entire drive of unallocated space. Now, we could kick this off and just choose next, or we could pre-partition it. Either way is just fine. I'm going to pre-partition it because I want to talk just briefly about some of the partitions that will be created on your Windows machine when you first install it. So if I choose Apply, and it will tell you to ensure that Windows is installed or the features work correctly, Windows might create additional partitions. This has a lot to do with like your EFI or extended firmware interface specification that needs to be there. There's an MSR, Microsoft System Reserved file if you're using something like BitLocker drive encryption. So all of the features, if you're going to use them, we have to definitely make sure that these partitions are created. If you choose next, it's going to do it automatically for you. I'm just going to go ahead and from here, choose next. And it's going to go through the installation process. Now, the installation process, depending on what kind of drive you have, could take anywhere from 3 to 4 minutes, 5 minutes, all the way up to 15 minutes to a half hour, especially if you're talking about being on the traditional mechanical drives. Now, when you're dealing with some of the solid-state drives that, you know, for instance, we put a solid-state drive in this, you can actually get this down as far as the first part of the installation process, right around 3 minutes or so. And if you talk about some of the NVMe drives that are plugged into the M2 sockets on your motherboard, they're a lot faster because they have access to the PCIe bus, and that would make for an even faster install. So you can see here, we're only not even a minute in, right around a minute in, and we're already at around 31%. I've kind of clocked this, this install here, and on this crucial SSD, 500 gigabyte SSD that we have, it's around 3 minutes, just over 3 minutes for the first part of the install. Now, it is important to understand, one of the reasons, and I was talking to the director, and we were kind of talking about, you know, how we would film this, is there's going to be some reboots. So you will see that there's a little bit of time that's going to go by here during this installation process, but I don't want to cut away and then come back and show you, because there is a reboot that's going to happen. And in fact, there's going to be 2 reboots in this. And that's because once it installs first, all right, it is running in RAM at this time, and it's also writing to the hard drive. But that small footprint Windows operating system that's allowing us to install a complete version of Windows is loading in memory, and we're going to reboot our computer so that we're actually booting off of the hard drive. So what you're going to see here is I'm going to, when it asks us to reboot, what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually pull the drive out of the USB slot because we don't want it to try to boot back to the installer. We want it to boot to our SSD, and I'm going to go ahead and choose reboot here, and you're going to see that that's going to happen. We're going back to our splash screen. We don't have to worry about booting into the USB drive because at this point, our operating system has been unpacked, written to the hard drive, and now it's about time that when it boots up, it's going to do a little bit of hardware detection. And you can see that it's starting the services and it's getting the devices ready. Now, what we will see sometimes too, if your computer is directly hooked to the internet, like ours is connected, you've seen us when we connected our peripherals, we connected to our access point. Part of the install, it will actually, as the hardware detection goes on, if it doesn't have a current driver, it'll go out to Windows, Microsoft's Windows Update, and it'll pull down that driver and download a basic driver long enough to basically get your, one that'll work enough to get you access to the hardware, and then from there, if you need to, you can go out to a third-party vendor and you can install their driver. which we're going to do in the next episode because there are a couple of drivers that we want to get installed. Now, the reboot will be a little bit faster, actually a lot bit faster, if you don't have an internet connection. That's perfectly fine. You can install, there's that reboot I was talking about after it said getting the devices ready. Again, it's doing hardware detection. Down in there in the Windows registry, it's building a blueprint of all the hardware that it sees, and it gets ready to talk to it, activate it, and even download and install some of those drivers from the Windows Update servers, just enough to get the installation finished. Then it reboots, and when it reboots, it should start to give us access to a Windows desktop. Now, the initial setup could be, again, it could be short, it could take a little bit longer. Like I said, if you're not connected to the internet, then what you're going to see is that the reboot process is actually fairly fast because it's not downloading any additional drivers as part of the installation process. Now, that's a good thing and it's a bad thing. It speeds up the time that it takes to do the install, but it doesn't speed up the time that it would take because you still have to download those drivers eventually from the internet. So I just leave it plugged into the internet. Now, I apologize ahead of time. You're going to see we've got kind of this short matted screen with these matted bars on the side. And I know it kind of looks like amateur hour, but that's because the video driver isn't fully functional yet. So what it's doing is it's just downloading or loading up a generic old VGA driver to give you access to the monitor so that you can at least see what you're doing in order to finish the install. And the install process is fairly, at this point, is fairly easy. We're just going to, you pick your region. We've already kind of picked these regions, but again, they are something that you can modify post-installation. We're going to choose yes on this. And then it's going to ask us if our keyboard layout is right, just confirming. And we picked United States here. You could change it, or you could even add another layout if you wanted. Maybe somebody's used to a Dvorak type keyboard arrangement, or maybe you've got some friends that are using the computer that maybe use the U.S. Arabic, for instance, keyboard arrangement. You could add the layout. This is only going to be for this demonstration purposes, so I'm only going to leave the default US layout here as that's what we're working on right now. Now at this point, what it's going to be doing is it's going to see if it can communicate with the driver or the network adapter. All right, at this point, we see that it can connect to the network, and you can see that up at the top of the screen now. Now we have to do the user account creation. This is the very first user that's going to log into this computer, and there's a couple of different ways that you could do this. You can see right here that we could go with the Microsoft account, and if you're in a home environment, I would recommend the Microsoft account because there's a lot of benefits to it. You can back up files to the cloud. If your computer ever crashes, you can turn around and you can download those files back to your computer after you reinstall or repair the operating system. But in my case, I'm going to use the other option, and it's kind of a little tricky. Notice it says domain join. We're not joining this to a corporate enterprise Windows domain, but this is how you add a local user account without connecting via a Microsoft account. So we're going to choose domain account instead. So it's asking us who is the person that's going to use this, and I'm just going to say this is going to be student01. All right, and we're going to go ahead and we'll choose next. And then it's going to ask us for a super memorable password. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to put in something that's memorable, a super secret Microsoft password of, well, all dots. Don't tell anybody though. We're going to choose next. Now, here are a couple of security questions, and these security questions you have to add 3 or put 3 of them in there because if you do lose your password, you can get back in via some of these questions. So it's going to ask you, what was your pet's first name? I'll just say Polly, maybe you had a bird. These are up to you. And we'll go ahead and you can see it's kind of, and in the background, you notice that flicker right there? That flicker is it actually installing some drivers in the background. So it's continuing to work in the background. That's not really a shoddy connection. As the drivers are installing, you might see, for instance, the video card kind of blinks on and off, and that's not something that is uncommon. So if we say, what was your childhood nickname? I'm just going to put Wes here for me, and I'm going to choose next. And let's see here. Where was the what's your oldest cousin's name? I'm going to put John here. We'll kind of put him in the episode, whether he knows it or not. We're going to choose next. And now it's going to say it's going to ask us for some of these privacy settings. If you are one of those ones that maybe wears the tinfoil hat and doesn't want to give out things like location data, some kind of the things that you're interacting with the operating system, you can certainly turn these off. I'm going to go ahead and accept the defaults and understand that these can be reconfigured after the fact if you choose to not to want to refine that a little bit more. Notice it says more access or do more across devices with activity history. This is where that Microsoft account comes in, because you can sync those settings across various devices that you log into your Microsoft account. We're not doing that here. We're using a local account, so I'm going to say no. Cortana, if you want to use Cortana, personally, I'm not really a big fan. Again, just a personal opinion here, but I'm going to say not now. And then it's going to say just a moment. Now, at this point, what you're going to see is that it's finalizing that user account creation, but it's not completely done. We should see the screen go black for a second, and it should say, hi, sit back, have a cup of coffee, enjoy a relaxing song. We're getting things ready for you. Well, it's not exactly saying that, but what's happening now is it's taking what's known as a default profile that's already in the operating system, and it's making a copy of it, and that it's assigning the username that we created during the installation process to that profile, so that when we log in, we'll have our desktop, we'll have a documents folder, we'll have a downloads folder, music folder, video folder, and we'll have settings that are just specific and isolated to the user that we created as a part of the installation. Now again, notice that it's saying that it could take several minutes. I've actually seen this take longer than the first part of the installation has. And again, especially when you have SSDs. And we don't have a really fast SSD in here. So again, if you're using one of the NVMe drives in the M2 slots that we could use on this motherboard, because we have one, have a couple of them in fact, that it could be very, very fast. And then you get up to this point and you're thinking, oh man, it is running fairly slow. That's okay. It's not a problem. There's a little bit of finalization with building that profile. All right, and you'll notice here that we have a desktop and we're ready to go. That essentially is how we install Windows on your PC. Now, we aren't done. In the next episode coming up, what we're going to do is we're going to show you how to verify that all of your drivers are in place and that the hardware is recognized, and verify if we have to install additional third-party drivers. But as far as installing your operating system, that's how it's done.
Thank you for watching IT Pro TV.